This episode of the podcast has been brought to you by Sweet Cheetah Publicity. Sweet Cheetah is an inclusive, socially conscious PR collective that puts their money where their mouth is. They have a current roster of bands that reads like a greatest hits anthology. Brainiac, Catholic School, Jawbox, The New Amsterdams, Oceans in the Sky. I mean, the list goes on and on. They also do PR for record labels such as A La Carte, Arctic Rodeo, Steadfast, Rad Girlfriend, and so many more. How do they pay it forward? How do they put their money where their mouth is? By generating thousands of dollars in annual charitable donations to the likes of Women in Vinyl, Coalition of Communities of Color, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and many, many more. The man has the receipts. I've seen them. It is real. The artists, labels, and podcasts Sweet Cheetah works with are curated with an eye on working primarily with friends. You could find Sweet Cheetah on all of the social media platforms, be it Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Just look for Sweet Cheetah PR and they will be there. He's been Tim, I've been Peter, and Sweet Cheetah has been beautiful. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. I'm your host, Peter, and I am still here. And tonight it is my pleasure to bring to you the EP release party for Fueral Date. Their new EP, Out of Prayers, is out now. Streaming, on cassette, on tour, everywhere you listen to music. This is 4 songs that embody pop sensibility within the subset of dark post-punk, darkwave, goth, whatever you'd like to call it. Out of Prayers is the follow-up to the full-length 2022's Coast Goth. This is a much shorter affair. This is more compact, more in line with the music culture as it stands now, as the full-length seems to be going slowly out of style. I'm not here to bemoan that fact. I'm just simply delivering the message that it seems to be that everyone is releasing singles and shorter and shorter and shorter albums. And that's okay, just so long as they possess the same quality as Out of Prayers does, and it certainly does. Tonight, the sole member of Fueral Date, Mr. Tony Arnold, and myself, discuss the project's trajectory, recordings, how prolific he's been since the pandemic. We discuss the reason for the name change, all of the things that had happened in his life that served as inspiration for the lyrical content of this EP and the album before it. If you like what you hear in this episode or any episode of the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast, would you please like, review, subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast. Also, if you head over to my Instagram or Facebook accounts, follow me there, share my content, let your friends know that you like what we have going on. Simply doing this would mean the absolute world to us and help to bring to you more episodes of this podcast. On with the show. As not to drag things out any further, I present to you Tony Arnold, Fueral Date, on the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast.
I had to do all kinds of like weird shit, but I don't know. Well, here we are.
Yeah, we're here. It's good. Thank God. And I fucked up yesterday royally. There was like all kinds of shit at work, and I got home late, and I had you marked down for Friday, even though like I go through our messages and it was all about Thursday.
Yeah.
I'm an asshole.
That's fine. No worries. No worries.
So how are you this evening, Tony?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm I'm no worse for wear, as it were, Um, so I kind of want to like dive kind of right into, Coast Goth. Like, what was that came out in August of this past year, correct?
Yeah, it was September 1st.
Oh, September 1st. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, how long did that take to kind of put together for you?
Well, before I started doing Funeral Date, I was doing it under the name Coast Goth Community Center.
Hmm.
And I put out like 3 albums in 2020. Like once lockdown started, I was like, well, fuck, I just hit recording hard and started putting stuff out. And the third one that I did, like half of those songs I ended up using for the Funeral Date stuff, and I like reworked them. And then like once I kind of had the formula of like what Funeral Date was, then it was pretty easy for me to sit down and write the other half of the album.
What was your headspace like though? Like, what were you listening to? What was like the point you were trying to get across, that whole flavor? Because to me, like, even though like you say you call it Coast Goth Community Center / Funeral Date, people think goth, but to me there's so much like film soundtrack, especially 70s horror film soundtrack, especially John Carpenter-esque
Yeah,
synth
John.
waves. And
Yeah, John Carpenter and video game music, like
yeah,
specifically like 16-bit video game music, are like huge influences on all the music that I make. But yeah, John Carpenter, the whole like 80s synth horror soundtrack, that's all huge. Um, I wasn't sure how well that was coming across. In one of the last shows I played, somebody said something to me about that song 24-Hour Birthday Party
yeah,
sounding like a video game. And I was like, yeah, you're the first person that has ever caught that.
very
But
much
yeah,
so. I mean, like, it has that same staccato, like, you know, uh, Nintendo-esque quality, like that 8-bit quality.
yeah.
Um, I can tell that at the very least you enjoyed those older games. I mean, I don't know how old of a human being you are. I'm almost 47 years old.
I'm 37, so
Yeah,
we're,
we're similar.
yeah,
We're really not that far apart. So
yeah,
you were there.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You felt it. There's a charm to it. And there
Yeah, it's all stuff that just like, I absorbed so much as a kid playing those games. And like, I've always really loved that music, especially like, you get into like that Donkey Kong country music and stuff where you can just listen to it as music and not just on a game. But it's also like when you're playing the game, you're hearing it on repeat for hours, and
Yeah.
it really like soaks into your subconscious.
I think the first time though, like, and this is going into almost like the late 90s, the first time a game's soundtrack really struck a chord with me was when Trent Reznor did the soundtrack to Quake.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've got that.
Like, there's something very visceral about that soundtrack. And like, arguably Duke Nukem had some great sound design going on as well. Like, there were games that really stuck out, but Quake, it was so moody. And you know I think it elevated the form
Yeah, I think
to
so
a
too.
degree. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there are a few bell ringers in that genre, I guess, that really like resonate with people, and that was definitely one of them. But I think lyrically too, you're coming from a different place than someone who would be construed as making dark post-punk or dark wave or goth or whatever you want to call it, because you're not tackling uh these dark romantic kind of like tomes. It has more to do with it's almost punk rock lyrics. It's reality based.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Um, yeah, and with some of it, like at the start, I had heard some song on SoundCloud, and one of the comments was pointing out like, it's interesting that you have like more positive lyrics because you don't really hear that in this kind of music. And I was like, I wonder if I could do that. Like, I wonder if I could make like love songs that are not like twisted necessarily. And I
mhm.
think that is kind of there in all of them. Like, they all have like that slight little twist to them to add the melancholy, but that's kind of what I was going for with, at least in the beginning.
Well, yeah, but when I say punk rock too, I mean like there is a positivity to what you do that is inherent kind of to like the especially the youth crew hardcore stuff, but you know what I mean? Like it elevates in a way that I think most post-punk and goth stuff doesn't necessarily even attempt to. You know, there's no basking in your own misery lyrically. You know, and
Right.
that's fun for the listener.
Well, I think it may have been on the interview that you did with him, but I saw an interview with Tobias from Softkill, and he was talking about something that I agree with, which is that a lot of this kind of music, like you listen to the lyrics and it's like you don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
That
Like
was with me,
I
yeah.
don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And so I want to have something that's more relatable.
Hmm. I mean, because what Toby does is he's not romanticizing anything. He's talking about shit that really happened.
Yeah.
There, it's not allegory. It's not, you know, these dark romantic tales. There's no Rimbaud to it all. It's real life. This really happened. I dig that. And as much as I dig the other end of that spectrum where like the Sisters of Mercy are talking about like Lucretia, my reflection. I love that too, but my
Yeah, but
heart,
what the fuck does that mean?
yeah, exactly.
You know?
It's more poetic license than world building or storytelling.
Yeah.
And I think the Coast Goth album is very world building. So I mean, I think, you know, if you could you kind of like key us into the world you were trying to build with it lyrically?
Well, like they're all about something. Like that always falling is about my wife.
Mm,
There's there's that song Grave Matter that's about Catholic guilt, which is a real big thing with me.
me
'Cause,
too.
yeah, I was raised Catholic and
Me too.
like I've been an atheist for like most of my life and you don't get away from that shit. That's like
Yeah.
ingrained, you know.
Yeah.
Um so that's a big thing. That's a big influence on most of my stuff. And then like there's that Heartbreak Beach song that I wrote. So last year my wife had a miscarriage
Oh, I'm sorry.
and that when we got home from the hospital, I sat down and wrote that. So that's what that was about. I think that might be the first time that I've ever sat down with something like specific in mind, like this is what I'm going to write about. Because usually, like, I'll write something and I'm not really thinking about it, but then at the end, I can look at it and go, "Oh, okay, that's what this is about."
But to lay yourself like completely bare and talk about something so personal and so heartbreaking in the format of a song, that has to be a difficult hurdle. I mean, coming from someone who's I've written an entire albums plural that have to do with some really like some stuff that I may not like talk to a complete stranger about. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
child molestation, incest, things like that. That came out in my most recent album a couple years ago. I just said, "Fuck it, I'm laying it all out there." Um, but like a miscarriage, like losing that option, that to be a father, that's a fucked up
yeah.
feeling
We've
for
been
you.
crying for like 8 years, so it was like it finally happened, and we were like, "Oh yes," and then have that stripped away. And then there's also the whole thing where like as a male, like it's almost like you're not allowed to outwardly show
Yeah,
grief because you have to be there for your partner, or at least that's how like society makes you feel.
especially like coming from like me, Irish Catholic, you're Italian Catholic, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, like we're kith and kin, we're the same thing.
yeah,
Like that idea of masculinity as this like stoic and carved in stone, like constant visage of power and virility. If you let that a chink in that armor occur, you cry, you feel emotion in front of other men, other people in general, like you feel like shit, even though
yeah,
that like you're allowed to feel that. That's for you. That's no one else's. No one can tell you
yeah.
how to feel. That's courageous.
Yeah, but at the same time, I feel like with art in general, like if you want it to connect with people, then have to do that. Like I could sing about a bunch of stupid shit that, you know, Draculas and stuff, but I
Yeah.
mean, it's not going to mean anything. I feel like whenever I sing it, whether like I play it live, like I need to be able to like I'm expressing something real and not just, you know, like, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, you know, there's nothing
No,
wrong about, you know, singing about Dracula stuff. I enjoy all that stuff, but that's just not the road that I wanted to take with it.
I think the bands from like the whole post-punk thing that resonated the most were the bands that didn't do that sort of thing though. Like Joy Division, like Lycia. They didn't, it wasn't about the theatrics, it was about, you know, the content and the artistry.
Yeah.
What really kind of stuck out for me as well with this album was the fact that it wasn't trying to kind of buy into like, okay, Soft Kill's big now, we're going to sound like Soft Kill, or you know what I mean? Like it was still its own thing, and it was still very punk rock. And
Yeah. And
I appreciated that. Like I could tell that you probably came from like a punk or hardcore scene somewhere in your youth.
yeah. And I think that, like, you know, I've listened to a lot of your shows and I've noticed that that's kind of a common thread with people that make this kind of music or
Mhm.
shoegaze now is
Yeah,
that we all came from metal and like, you know, I was a hardcore kid.
yeah,
I owned many pairs of Jordans and
yeah,
basketball shorts,
yep.
you know, so and you bring all of that like ethos to what you're doing. I mean, it's a different kind of world, but it's not at the same
It's not.
time.
It's still punk rock. I mean,
Yeah.
hardcore's punk. Thrash metal comes from punk. Post punk is obviously from punk. We get to be punks, but we get to be artists as well, and that's the fucking awesome part about all this. Because we don't have to just make stuff people can like mosh and two-step to. We can do something introspective, creative, and thoughtful and realistic, and present it in a way that maybe, you know, it hasn't been heard before, but
Right.
it's still okay because we're not codified anymore. And I've said this a million times on this show too, but I don't think genre matters like it did in 1989 or 1999.
I don't think so either, especially with like Gen Z kids. They don't give a fuck.
No, I love them. I love these Gen Z kids.
Yeah.
They live their truth fearlessly. They don't give a shit who hates them for it or what kind of mockery is made of them, especially by the right. Who, you know, fuck them. But
Yeah.
you know what I mean. These kids really get to embody their own spirit and like live their own truth in a way that I think about myself at age 13 in 1989, shaving a mohawk into my hair for the first time. That was a big deal back then. I rode a skateboard and had a mohawk. You can imagine what I got called in northeastern Pennsylvania back then. But could you imagine, and I can't, uh, two of my friends who were of color in my same grade, and at least two of my friends in my same class who turned out to later be LGBTQ, what they were feeling at that time.
Right.
I felt like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm getting picked on like this. And it was still screwed up the way I got treated, but it wasn't as bad as my friend Lionel and my friend Tommy, who Tommy got me into hardcore when we were even younger than that. They were people of color. They were tormented in this white town, and being a closeted queer person, even worse. You know, these kids don't have to. They don't have to fuck with that anymore. They don't have to deal with it. They don't have to shoulder that burden. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I'm kind of jealous, and I
I
hate
am.
whenever people get on this shit where they're like, you know, back in my day we had to play outside and we didn't have the internet. I'm like, it sucked back then. It sucked. Like I
Flyering
remember,
at the mall, you can have it.
yeah, and like a good example of this I can think of is when I was a kid, I wanted to watch that movie Eraserhead so bad, and I
Yeah.
could not find it anywhere. No video store in South Mississippi had Eraserhead, and I finally was able to download it at some point once I got like cable internet and stuff.
Yeah.
But now, you know, I can turn on HBO Max and watch that shit. So, you know, I don't know. I don't miss that shit. I
Uh,
would much rather have the convenience of access.
yeah, but because like I come from tape trading. That was like impetus. That was me, 1987, trying to find Metallica No Life to Leather demo. Me like and you go into the backs of these magazines and you find people to trade tapes with. That's how I heard Biohazard for the first time. That's how I heard Gorilla Biscuits for the first time, because people would get their demos and I would trade like local demos of bands from here to them, and you'd be sending shit back and forth through the mail. That it was cute, it was cool, but it was a pain in the dick, and I would rather just log on and go on to Instagram or whatever and see who these new cool little bands are, because who knows. I remember Turnstile's demo coming out. Now Turnstile is fucking massive, and I don't bemoan them. There's nothing, they're not less hardcore because they're in a Taco Bell commercial.
Right.
You know, I'm sorry, I just don't buy into that shit anymore. But in the 80s and early 90s, I probably would have.
Yeah, probably. And I came from that same thing. Like I used to trade Nine Inch Nails bootlegs. That was my
Yeah,
big thing. I
I
was
love Nine
super
Inch
into
Nails.
Nine Inch Nails. Yeah.
I
I've
used to be a
noticed
pen
that's
pals
another
with Trent
thing.
Reznor back in the day.
You do what?
I was pen pals with Trent Reznor back in the late 80s, early 90s.
Nice. I've noticed too, like that's a big thing with people who do what I do, where it's just a solo thing, is those people were all at some point enormous Nine Inch Nails fans and took
Okay.
that influence of like, I can just fucking do this. I don't need a band. I can just do it.
Yeah. And who did it better really than Trent?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, Trent comes up a lot for me because being a kid from Pennsylvania, and this kid from Pennsylvania is doing something so incredible singularly. And it was very subversive in 1989 when Head Like a Hole came out. The first time I heard it was in a really crappy sci-fi horror movie called Class of 1999. Came out in 89, and Head Like a Hole was the song in the movie. Then the video for that song came out on MTV, and like it wasn't that crazy. They were just guys with weird hair with dreads and stuff going crazy, covered in it looked like VHS tape. They were wrapped up in it and screaming and going nuts. But imagine being 13, seeing that for the first time. Like,
oh yeah. You know, the next thing that comes on is Bon Jovi or whatever. You know, that is a big deal.
Yeah, that was like, especially for me, like I was listening to Fugazi then. I was listening to Morrissey then. I was listening to a lot of left of the dial stuff, but that outpaced even the craziest metal for me because it was so experimental.
Yeah, Nine Inch Nails was a big jumping point for me into like rock and metal music in general, because so like when I was a kid I listened to nothing but hip hop, and then I heard the Limp Bizkit, which, you know, it's a guilty pleasure now.
Why?
Well, I guess now we're at a point where no one cares. But
I interviewed Fred Durst, but it was so unlistenable that I couldn't release it.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got into that because it had that crossover appeal of the hip hop that I was into, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And it was like right when $3 Bill had come out, when like Faith started popping up on MTV. So like right after that though, I found Nine Inch Nails, and then I started getting into like death metal and all kinds of like Godflesh.
Godflesh. That's another like big touchstone for me. Justin K. Broderick can do no wrong. I love Jesu. I love Godflesh.
Oh yeah.
All like, but if you look right here, I'm wearing a Public Enemy hat.
Yeah.
And Fear of a Black Planet and De La Soul, 3 Feet High and Rising are right there.
Yeah.
You know, that's like, I'm a hip hop kid too. I think being a hardcore kid, if you're not into hip hop a little, you weren't really paying attention.
Right. And I think that hip hop influence comes across in my stuff too, with like beats. I think like the beats are much more hip hop influence than like, you know, 4 on the floor rock drums or whatever.
No, to me, it's more 808 breakbeat style, like Portishead style almost.
Yeah, I use an Alesis HR16, which is the same drum machine that Justin Broderick used. Yeah, I love it. It's so easy to use. I love it so much. But That, and even that, like, I remember reading an interview with Justin Broderick about how that's why they used that for the Godflesh stuff, is because it was more like they had more hip hop influence on the
That's
drums than metal stuff.
that's why he did Techno Animal too. That was like he was really feeling himself with the hip hop thing, especially with the electro movement in Britain at that time.
Yeah.
You know, and that's very evident in your album. I could tell you were into this stuff. I could tell like you're the type of person who would listen to Final and Techno Animal. Uh, what occurs to me too, though, is it seems like you had your ear to the ground with a lot of the really like the stuff that even people who were in the know wouldn't kind of really be into, like bands like the darkwave groups like Lycia, like Thanatos, like all the really fringy stuff. Seems like it's kind of in your arsenal as well.
Yeah, and I also, like, I'm really big into noise stuff, and I've got like a Neubauten tattoo and a coil tattoo and stuff. And
Coil.
yeah,
Mm,
coil was a huge thing. That was huge for me. Was
me too.
coil. That was when I first started getting into like recording my own music. Is I was doing stuff that sounded like coil, and
The Chris and Cozy stuff is,
oh yeah, oh yeah,
and you know, it was a big one for us, for my group of people here back in the day was the themes from Hellraiser coil
oh
stuff.
yeah. I love that so much.
Oh my
Oh man.
god, it's like he wanted it in the movie.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It
They
was the
said it was too scary
it
or
was too
whatever the quote
scary.
was. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but you have to give Clive Barker a lot of credit. Not only did he want coil involved, but he wanted oh man, Tumor Circus, which was like Dead Kennedys members
Yeah.
involved in it. Like he was really reaching into like fringy music, fringy. Like he was Chris and Cozy, like everybody from Coil were into these magazines that were like body modification and S&M stuff, and that's what Clive was into
Yeah.
aesthetically, and that's what made him make the Hellbound Heart. That sort of thing was very influential on industrial and noise music abound all the way across the board. I think people forget that. I think they just think of it now as like a dancey version of metal, where not really the case. If you listen to like pre-industrial Ministry, they were new wavers. Even like Trent Reznor before Nine Inch Nails, he was in a new wave band. That's where they all came from.
Yeah.
And it's the same for all of us. I think we have a starting point that doesn't seem like it you can glean where we end up from it, but it makes sense in the wash. So bearing that in mind, when you were a kid, before you found like punk or hardcore or metal, what was that first kind of first album, first music that moved you in a very specific way that made you say to yourself, I want to be a musician?
Um, Probably Pretty Hate Machine. Like I think Nine Inch Nails, that was the point where I was like, I want to get a guitar. I want to learn how to make music. Like I had that Closure video, that
Oh yeah.
self-destruct tour, and that was what I wanted to do. Is like I wanted to I still like that's my dream, is to live out the self-destruct tour.
Yeah.
It's just so chaotic and just destroying keyboards and stuff. But that was the keystone for me, where I was like, that's what I want to do.
Do you remember why though? Like what the first song was, what the first exposure was that really instilled that in you? Like was it a music video? Was it the first time hearing it, a first lyric? What was it? What was it exactly?
I think it was probably Terrible Lie. There was a video of him doing that, and he's like super into it, and he's like bearing himself naked, these lyrics and stuff, and
Mhm.
it was just the whole thing was so appealing to me because I'd never seen anything like that. Like my parents were into like top 40 stuff and like hair metal and stuff. That was just like it's fine, but it's very like disingenuous,
Yeah.
So to see that like just incredible sincerity was like that was what really struck a chord with me.
And it's like everything you do, Terrible Lie is open, it's airy and sparse, but it hits in very specific ways, like those arpeggiated keyboard fills when, like, because the drums, like, they're not fast, it's just like boom, and he's it something about it feels like the way when you're watching Terminator, in the scenes from when the machines have taken over and the earth is wiped out and the cyberdyne, like, machines are coming at you. That sounds the way that looks to me.
Yeah.
It's apocalyptic.
Yeah, for sure.
Your music can be very for the positivity of the lyrics, can be very apocalyptic.
I think that's something that comes from that like film soundtrack influence too, is that, you know, that kind of music like paints a picture for you.
Yeah.
So
Especially when you consider, the John Carpenter of it all, like, what was it? Prince of Darkness. Very
yeah,
apocalyptic film, very overlooked for his canon too. Like, people don't really bring that one up that much because, well, I don't know why. Because I think that's a phenomenal film.
it's actually my favorite one of his.
It's
Yeah,
that and The Thing
the
are my
string
two
theory
favorites.
horror.
Yeah. Like, evil is a substance.
Yeah,
Evil is tactile, tangible. They're staving it off. They have it sealed up in vats and it's leaking and no one can stop it. There's a force of nature to, Armageddon and evil and sin. As a Catholic, that's fun.
yeah,
That's fun. That's a fun, fun little movie. And you
oh
get
yeah,
Alice Cooper in there too. Like, we have
stabbing
a,
people with bikes.
yeah,
Yeah,
yep, we have a message for you.
yeah. Um, but yeah, and that brings me around to like another huge like influence thing is, talking about Clive Barker and John
Mm,
Carpenter is like the people that were always the most influential to me were people who didn't just do one thing, like Harmony Korine or David Lynch or somebody who like they make movies, but they paint, they make
yeah.
music, they write, like those were the people that always because I didn't just make music. Like I went to film school, and so I've made movies, and I used to paint a lot and write a lot, and so I've done everything, and I think that at a certain point, like everything starts to influence it. So like music becomes influenced by literature, and you know,
Well, an artist is an artist is an artist. John Lennon once said, he was asked a question about, the commerce of the Beatles, and he said, I don't know and I don't care. I'm an artist. Hand me a fucking tuba. I'll get you a sound out of it. That's what it is.
yeah,
I write. My wife's a filmmaker by trade. I make music. She's from a family of musicians. She's from jazz royalty, for God's sake. We have just a vibe of art throughout our home, and our son is picking up on it too. And it's music, it's literature, it's film, it's the visual arts as far as painting, drawing. It's all the same thing. You're expressing.
yeah,
If you allow yourself to express yourself in any way you see fit, it's art. That's that's the greatest gift you can give to the world, is an expression of yourself. That may sound narcissistic, but we need art, don't we?
yeah, and that's just something that like Harmony Korine is one of my biggest influences. Period, and he talked about how once you start making multiple things, like it all just becomes one body of work. It's not just
Yeah.
like, oh, well, here's my film career and here's my book career. Like it's all just, one large body of work.
And what Harmony has done really well, I think, is corner the market on weird,
Yeah.
lack of a better term, because we all heard of Harmony Korine first from writing and starring in, for a little while, Kids. But it wasn't until Gummo when we really knew what Harmony was about, right?
Yeah, and especially like because I'm from the South, you know, I live in the South, so when I saw Gummo, like that was the world that I lived in. Like I saw that and I was like, oh, I've been in that house. I've met those people.
Mhm.
So that really touched me.
And
Uh,
the soundtrack, huh.
oh yeah, oh yeah,
Like
that put me
everybody
on
I
a
like
lot of stuff.
at that time period, it was almost every band I was listening to then. You know, everyone from I Hate God to like the only band at that time that wasn't on there because I think they'd broken up by that point was Acid Bath. But the rest of like the whole sludge metal scene was united there. Eh,
Yeah, and most of that was from Louisiana, so that was all
yeah.
stuff that I grew up listening to. But movie soundtracks in general were a big thing for me because that was a way that I found a lot of music that I still listen to. That you know, because like my parents weren't into that kind of stuff, and I live in a place that's pretty isolated.
Yeah.
And I would have friends that had older brothers that were into The Cure or whatever, and that was how I would get into that stuff. But like movie soundtracks too, like The Crow or something like that.
That was a big one for everybody. And
Yeah.
The Cure is on there with an original song that is one of their best.
Oh yeah.
That's Burn. Also, you have Nine Inch Nails covering Joy Division. You have Pantera covering Poison Idea.
Yeah.
And you have Rage Against the Machine pretty much covering an Inside Out song from Zach De La Rocha's old hardcore band, Inside Out. You know, there's so much going on there that even Stone Temple Pilots giving one of their greatest songs to that soundtrack. There's not a missed step in that body of work. For Love Not Lisa, when are you gonna ever hear that band again?
Yeah. Or Thrill Kill Cult, and you know.
Well, yeah, Thrill Kill Cult, where they were already kind of a cult standard at that point, but man, yeah, flawless. Same thing with you get Judgment
Medicine
Medicine, yeah,
with
yeah.
the Robin Guthrie stuff, like that was a big thing that pushed me into like dream pop. Because like Cocteau Twins is one of my like Cocteau Twins and The Cure are my two favorite bands.
Yeah,
And
I
Boards
get
of Canada.
Boards of Canada. Oh my God, you love good shit. My daughter's named after a song on that record right there.
Elise.
Yeah, Elise. There is so much of Cocteau Twins and The Cure that inform everything I love about music. When I was a kid, like a young kid, probably 6 or 7 years old, I was already a Cure fan. And Cocteau Twins and Echo and the Bunnymen came shortly thereafter because they were on the radio at that time.
Yeah.
Not heavily, but they were there enough for me to notice, and it never left me. There was 120 minutes. I'm sure you remember 120 minutes.
Oh yeah.
When that first came out on MTV, I was staying up really late at night in my bedroom with headphones plugged into I had this little tiny, I bought it with my confirmation money when I was 12, this little television
Oh.
set, you know, and I had the headphones jacked into it. I'm listening, waiting for 120 minutes and Headbangers Ball to come on Friday nights. You could still find things on MTV back then. That was a place
Yeah.
like Yo MTV Raps. Like that's how I found Dell and Hieroglyphics. You know, that's there. You could find it all if you stayed up late enough, especially. But where's the avenue for that now? Is it just surfing, Instagram and Facebook to find
YouTube, yeah.
and YouTube to find?
YouTube is great because you can find so much stuff that like I remember when YouTube first came out and I started looking up like Sisters of Mercy videos and stuff that like I had never seen any of that shit.
Mhm.
But I could suddenly find all of it and it was amazing. I think YouTube's one of the greatest things ever.
It really, for an artist, for a musician, YouTube is indispensable. That's you put something up on YouTube and you know how to coax the algorithm, pop up at the right times. You can really clean up there, which I find it funny that I even found you to begin with because I was already listening to you when you told me you liked my podcast. It's not like I was not aware of you.
Yeah,
I
because
don't-
I think you had randomly followed me and I was like, oh, that's awesome. Because I had
Mhm.
listened to your podcast and I like, how did you find me, if you don't mind me asking?
I was looking through. I went down a rabbit hole on Apple Music, and everyone I listened to, I was going through. At the bottom they show you bands that are similar to. And
Hmm.
I don't even remember who I listened to. I think it wasn't Soft Kill, but it was maybe Lesser Care. And I saw you there, Funeral Date. I was like, that's a clever name for a fucking band if I ever heard one. So I just went right there and I listened and I really liked it. So I immediately went and followed you on Instagram, and then like the rest is history. But the thing about this podcast is I don't bullshit. Like, if I like you, I'm going to try and have you on my show.
Yeah.
People have reached out to me that I don't really. It's not that I hate their music, but I'm not enthusiastic about it. So I'm just like, I back burner it. And not to be mean, but what am I going to talk to you about if I don't actually love what you do? That's
Right.
disingenuous. That's bullshit. That's pandering and fake. I don't care about that.
Yeah. And like when I told you that I liked your podcast, I
Yeah.
wasn't like, hey, maybe you should have me on. Like,
No, that was my
it just
idea.
happened.
That
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
100% my idea. The second you reached out to me, I'm like, when you coming on, bro? Let's do it. And that's the way I prefer to operate, because when I did a fanzine back in 1991, that's what it was all about. Like I sought out the bands that moved me, whether they were local to me or maybe not so local. I would go into their records and you could find their addresses right in there. You write them a letter and either they go for it or they don't. But back then, normally they did. I base everything off of that experience, that the idea that great music should be accessible. You're not on this pedestal. I'm not on a pedestal. We're all a part of this organism,
Yeah.
and that's how it should be. Do you play out a lot with this project?
Yeah. I think I've played like 15 or 16 shows since last year, because it was about a year ago that I rebranded and changed the name to Funeral Date.
And I
And
like your old name, by the way. I really like that name.
yeah, thanks. Whenever I like last year, we went and saw Soft Kill, and I talked to Toby for a while, and I'd mentioned that, and he was like, "I really like that name, but yeah, Funeral Date's more on brand," which,
Yeah.
you know. But once I like rebranded it, somebody had messaged me about playing a show, and I had never really played a show where I sang. Like I've played shows. I've been in metal bands and stuff, like death metal bands, and played, and so I wasn't new to that, but
Yeah.
I was new to like exposing myself like that in
Center of
front of
attention.
people.
Yeah.
And also like being by myself, it's when you're up there with 4 other people, it's different than when you're up there by yourself, because everyone's staring at you,
Mm-hmm.
and it's uncomfortable. So I've gotten really big into using the fog machine a lot, because then I can't see the people, and that helps a lot. But yeah, I got a show tomorrow actually.
Oh, awesome.
But yeah, I've been playing a lot, and I'm constantly surprised at the kind of people who come up to me and tell me how much they liked it. It's like people that I never in a million years would have looked at and said like, "Oh, this person likes The Cure," but they'll come up and they'll be like, "Oh, I love," and they'll start name checking bands, and I'm like, "How the fuck do you know this? Like, what?" And it's just amazing. It's really great.
You can't really pigeonhole people anymore. Like we were saying before about the Gen Z set, they're not like you see me walking around in an Ink and Dagger shirt, I like hardcore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's no question. Like people don't know Ink and Dagger. They are a Pennsylvania gothy hardcore band from the 90s. They were a very specific thing. But these kids now, they're not, they look either plain or whatever, but they don't look like they're into anything left of center. And it surprises you every time. My little nephew, which of course I'm an influence on, but he's a preppy little kid, and he discovered black metal and death metal. He's like, "Uncle Pete, you like Mayhem, right?" Yeah. I've liked Mayhem since your mother was your age. You know, um, it's unassuming now. You don't have to dive headlong into a subculture to be a fan, and I dig that. I think that's important because you come by it more honestly that way, almost.
Yeah, because I'll have these guys come up to me that are like super thick accents, like straight off the farm country dudes, and they're like talking about the Cure and stuff, and it just blows my mind in the best possible way.
Yeah. Who have you been playing with?
Just any like local bands usually, because I'm the only person doing what I'm doing around here.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's another thing why like what I'm doing doesn't quite sound exactly like everyone else that's doing what I'm doing, is because I'm isolated.
Yeah.
And I'm not in a big city where there's 50 other bands that are doing this that I'm influenced by. So I'm only influenced by like stuff that I like, which is so varied.
Yeah.
And all over the place. But it's not like, you know, I've got 5 other darkwave bands that I'm friends with that I'm trying to keep up with.
Well, no, I mean, you're friends with Kicking, and they're like, I don't even know what you call them. They're heavy, but they're also like shoegazy, but they also have.
Yeah, they're the homies. Yeah, I love them.
To me, there's like an aspect of quicksand in what they do, like because there's post-hardcore in it. There's so many different flavors in that band, but they're still like almost stoner rock in a way, in a great way.
There's more bands in Mississippi that are starting to pop up that are closer to what I do. Like where I'm at, there's nothing. There's one band called the Murs that I love. It's more like psychedelic, like experimental rock. Like they'll cover Suicide songs and stuff.
Oh, wow.
But they're the only other band that's like completely different than everything else. Because on the coast where I'm at, it's like pop punk, blues, and like metal, like the I Hate God kind of metal.
Yeah, like sludge metal.
Yeah, but so in like Hattiesburg and Jackson, there's more bands popping up. Like in Hattiesburg, there's this band called Detect that does post punk.
I know Detect. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I saw that you follow them too. Like
yeah.
I love them. He's a shy guy, Warren. He's good though.
I love Warren. I love Warren, but he's just too shy to do an interview.
Yeah, and there's like, and it's great now because especially like that band MS Paint's starting to pop off.
Yeah.
So that's casting a lens on Mississippi, and people are starting to look. And I talk about this a lot. It's good that like all of us are starting to find each other, and we're all starting to connect. And so now, it's one thing when you look and you say, hey, there's this cool band in Mississippi out in the middle of nowhere. That's weird. But it becomes something else when you look and go, oh, there's a scene in Mississippi that is in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. But what it takes is bands, to create these scenes, to inspire kids to form scenes, to become their own microcosm.
Yeah, and that's a big thing is I'm trying to get more, because I know there are a lot of kids that make this kind of music that are in their bedroom and stuff, and I've met some, and I'm trying to get them, you got to get out and play shows, and it's good because they're seeing me do it, and they're seeing that people like it.
Yeah,
and that's really inspiring, I guess, to them, which is great.
Sure, because that's the lesson. Like if you just put yourself out there a little, you get so much more in return.
Yeah.
Because it just takes showing up, putting a little effort into actually playing in front of people, and the returns are so vast. Like to make music in your bedroom is one thing, and it's great and it feels good to do it. But when you're in front of, I don't care if it's 5 people who really like what you're doing, that's a charge. That's a high. That's unlike anything else.
Yeah, and because now I'm at a point where more people are finding me, and so I've got people that are showing up to shows just to see me. Like the last show I had, there was a group of like goth people that came in, and I was like, they're obviously here to see me, because I was playing with like a doom metal band and like some straight punk band, and I was like, they're definitely here to see me, and they're just dancing the whole time, and it was, I don't know, it just felt great.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So are you recording something new? When's the new album
Yeah,
coming down the
well,
pike?
I've actually got something like 25 songs recorded. I've always recorded a lot, and I've been very prolific with that. And it's like making music to me is like, even if nobody was listening, I'd still be doing it because it's my therapy.
Yeah.
It's like I always tell people it's like the only reason I make music is to have something to preoccupy myself so I don't kill myself.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know.
Yes.
But so I'm constantly recording stuff. I've got a 2-song single that I'm going to put out soon. And then I don't know if I'm going to put out an EP or an album. I'm thinking that like albums might be done because
They are.
I've noticed that the way like it has to do more with attention spans than anything, because I'll look at my Spotify plays and like the first half of my album will have a decent amount of plays. And then the second half, it'll drop off significantly.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking I'm going to do EPs.
Like 2 to 4 songs, 7 max seems to be the industry standard now. I mean, especially when you look at the hip hop sphere. A good example would be Kids See Ghosts, which was Kanye before he went completely off the deep end with Kid Cudi, who I do respect. That album did incredibly well. There's 7 songs on it. Then Kanye did the Nas album with 7 songs on it. You don't have to do 12 to 15 songs on a record anymore for it to be considered an album. 5 or 6 songs, that's a good
Well,
record.
even if you look back at some of those early post-punk stuff, like 17 Seconds or Faith, like those songs only have like 8 or 9 songs.
Yeah.
They're pretty short, like, and 2 of them will be short instrumental pieces.
Even if you want to go back further, Led Zeppelin's Coda or Presence, there were 7 songs and 8 songs respectively.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to have a 10. Like usually 10 songs seems to be like the standard for a full length. Nobody cares anymore. If you were to just say fuck the album format completely and release 1 song here, 2 songs there, it's all the better. Trent Reznor is another example. The last 3 releases, 5, 6, 7 songs.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just that attention span thing.
And
but
nobody bitched. No one cared.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think I'm gonna try to like send it around to some labels and see if anybody be interested before I just put it out myself. Like I'm not really in a big rush because I'm still trying to get people to listen to the last one that I put out. Like I used to be bad about, so when I first started like learning how to record, because I've always played music, but it was around 2012 that I sat down and was like, all right, I'm gonna learn how to do this myself. And I started making noise and recording it. And the project that I had at that time is called Dudes. And I just started recording everything and releasing it, because before that I had like recorded stuff and I would delete it. And I'd get depressed and delete it,
Yeah.
And then so I was like, if I start posting it online, then it'll be harder for me to delete it and I can just archive it. And then people started finding it, but I made a little net label or whatever to, as a way to catalog it. And I think the last time I checked, there were like 530 albums on there. And I'd say at least half of them, if not more, are mine, because I had some people contact me and I was like, well, if I put out stuff from other people, it'll legitimize it more. But like most of the stuff that I made, that I was just, putting out everything, I was off my meds and totally manic and just,
oh yeah,
you know how it goes.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
I do.
But you know that game. But then I started to slow down and the noise became more like song based. And at first it was sort of like Black Dice kind of stuff where it's like rhythmic noise. And then they just turned into songs at some point. And then like once I started doing the Fueral Date thing, I was like, all right, well, I need to slow down, and because I'm playing shows and I'm putting more time, like I put more time into mixing that because I recorded it myself.
Yeah.
mixed it myself and everything. And I put more time into that than I've ever put into anything. And it's still like lo-fi because it was done in my bedroom, so it's gonna have that inherently lo-fi sound. But I don't know. I just wanted to spend time to get it sounding because there's a difference between lo-fi and just sounding shitty. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah, very true. But when things are lo-fi yet are well written, there's a quality to that becomes timeless.
Yeah, and that's why because I've looked into getting other people to mix and master my stuff, but I don't really more of like a money issue because it'll get expensive to get somebody who will do it well.
Yeah,
And so, and everybody's always said that, which is, as long as the songs are there, the recording doesn't matter as much.
not as much. I mean, as long as it's still translating, it's still you can still, kind of get the point. Most of the stuff that really resonates with me to this day are things that tend to be, like 4-track or 8-track recordings done in a bedroom because, it harkens back to like Elliott Smith's early work or
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like it's intimate. It's like someone's telling you a secret,
Yeah, stuff
you
like that
know?
was always huge with me too, like Sebadoh and
Yeah.
stuff like that, all that early stuff where it was just 4-track. I've got a couple 4-tracks. I've got another project called Goblin Paw that's just 4-track straight to cassette raw black metal.
Oh, nice. Nice. I love
Yeah.
that shit. I love that shit.
Yeah, like that Zaster kind of stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, oh,
Yeah.
that's the most unhinged music on earth when you listen to, like, Xaster or, Leviathan, um
Did you ever see that Vice documentary
yes,
where
yes.
that guy is like, there's like some fucking hipster dude interviewing the Zasser guy, and he said something like, you know, I don't talk shit about stuff that I can't back up. Like, I'm not saying I'm gonna kill myself. What I'm saying is maybe you should look into killing yourself.
Yeah,
And that guy, like, you just see the life drain out of him. Like, he's so uncomfortable. It like he thought he was gonna be like cool guy, and then he's like, oh, I'm in like a real place now, and I don't think I want to be here.
yeah, like, this guy actually feels the way he's speaking to me.
Yeah.
Like, nothing against Vice, I think Vice does great work, but that dude was outclassed.
Oh yeah.
He goes over and he interviews people who are actually, like, for lack of a better term, criminals and people with real problems. People who have experienced violence, people who have mental problems, real life problems, something that I wouldn't shy away from because I know all about it.
Yeah.
But this guy is he's some suburban dude that like, oh yeah, I like one man black metal that's made, in bedrooms. That's my shit. You don't know because you don't understand. There's a darkness that's coming from that actually exceeds the stuff that was going on in Norway when they were burning down churches. It's
Yeah.
it's not all just cinematic at that point, you know.
Right.
But I respect the people who make that kind of music because it's pure.
Oh
It
yeah.
it reminds me of what grindcore was when I was in my first grindcore band in the early 90s. It was political. It was almost hippie in a way
Yeah.
because we were all vegans. We were all animal rights activists. We were all socialists. And we were trying to show the world that or turn a mirror on the world so they can see like the sound we're making is the way we feel about you.
Right.
That was the point. That was the protest. um I think what you do maybe is not a protest, but it's certainly a reflection of an honesty in you that doesn't pander or try to ascribe itself to a genre, a movement. It's just, this is me. This is my truth.
Yeah. And I've also never been good at like I'll sit down and say like, all right, well, I'm gonna make some dark wave stuff, but
Hmm.
it doesn't come out exactly how like in my head I'm thinking I want it to sound. Like it never comes out that way. And I think that's just most artists, you know, it never comes out the way that you want it to come out, but that doesn't mean it comes out bad.
Right. I mean, Billy Corgan said it, with the first, like, what was the first EP before the first full length? I forget. It was a single, but Smile, wasn't it? Smile, the first
Um,
Smashing Pumpkins.
I think so.
When he'd recorded that, he said he he went into it with the intention of making it sound like this massive Pink Floyd statement, and it came out as this jangly, angular, like bleak indie rock, and it informed the rest of his career, but it was never the way he intended it to sound. That's beautiful. That's
Well, even
perfect.
well with them too, even like I found this video I'd never seen of them before from some like cable access show in Chicago in the late 80s.
Yeah,
You know what I'm talking about? Where they're
I do.
playing like more gothy stuff.
They were goth. They were a goth band.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was awesome.
They were trying to be like somewhere between like a darker New Order mixed with like uh, Sisters of Mercy almost thing, but more punky, and they got more psychedelic and more hippie almost, and it served them so well. It served them so well.
Yeah.
uh, to come out with like Gish is a wonderful album, and Rhinoceros is a juggernaut of a song. But when Siamese Dream came out, like Cherub Rock was the first single, but the first hit truly was Today. It is the most uplifting music in indie rock that had ever been made, and lyrically, it was about killing yourself.
Yeah.
What a dichotomy!
Well, that's something that I talk about, which the Pumpkins are a huge influence on me, and they have
Mm-hmm.
always been. But one of the things that I talk about with my music is that it's like happy sad. It's
Yeah,
like, so I
like
want it to be like danceable. Like a lot of the Cure stuff is like that,
yeah,
especially like around the mid to late 80s is like it'll be danceable and stuff, but then you listen to the lyrics and you're like, wow, that's incredibly sad. You know what another thing is?
disintegration.
Yeah, well, another thing that's like that is I've always been super into like 50s music, like doo-wop and stuff. And there's like this song called Runaway,
Oh yeah, that's
right? I think it's Del Mitchell,
oh, is it Del Mitchell?
Del something. I don't know. Anyway, it's like super dancy and you listen and he's like, I'm a crying in the
Yeah.
rain, tears are falling, and you're like, wow, this is incredibly sad, but
Wishing you were
it's
here by me to end this misery, and I wonder. Yeah.
yeah, but it's super poppy. And I don't know. So that's kind of what I want to go for is like I don't want to capture the depressing side of gothy stuff. Like I want to capture the poppy sound of it where people can dance, but I want to capture that melancholy
Well, that's what
through like the lyrics.
yeah, that's what the Batcave era was all about in the goth scene in England. It was a dance club, but it was, like all of these like oh god, I'm trying to think, like Red Lorry, Yellow Lorry, and the Bolshoi, all of these bands that were musically dancey, guitar wise melancholy, lyrically suicidal.
Yeah. Well,
Alien Sex Fiend is like that. Like,
I think the band that eh, like, and there's one song in particular is that band, the Dance Society. You know
yeah,
that band?
yeah.
They have that song Somewhere.
Hmm.
Like that is the exact song. Like that's what I want Funeral Date to sound like. That's what I'm going for. Is it's like poppy kinda. It's got the synth in there, and it's just so good. Like that song just makes me feel like I'm melting. It's great.
And what's great about that is it all does kind of date back to like Runaway. And, you know, in the 50s, there was some very, very dark music occurring in the confines of like popular rock, or, you know what I mean? Like it was all like Roy Orbison was the most depressed motherfucker ever to play rock and roll.
Yeah,
And
there's a Roy Orbison song, and this was something that I've kind of like taken note of. Is I think that the first lyrics are something like, "Your sweetheart doesn't love you anymore. Not my sweetheart doesn't love me anymore. Your sweetheart
Yours.
doesn't love you anymore."
Yeah.
And that's like I've tried to do that second person thing a lot in my music
Hmm.
because I think that's something that a lot of music is like. It's a lot easier for other people to relate to it if the I is not in there.
Yeah, because you're talking to the third person. You're orating. You're in a discussion with the listener.
Yeah, and because I've also always liked music that was like vague enough that you may know what it's about, but you can still take it and apply it to meaning something else to
Yeah.
you. Like it's not so hyper specific that like like that Heartbreak Beach song. Like it's not
Yeah.
hyper specific. This is what this is about the miscarriage. So you can listen to that and apply it to I'm going through a breakup or something, and so that's kind of what I'm going for with the Funeral Date stuff.
Now, in writing and executing and releasing Heartbreak Beach, does that lead to healing for you?
Sort of. It's every time I play it, I like tell the story about what it's about before I play it live,
Yeah.
and I always fuck it up. I always like make little mistakes on the guitar parts, which I kind of do that live anyway, and I don't really worry about it because I feel like because I'm playing backing tracks and then I'm playing guitar and singing over it, and I feel like that adds like a punk rock element to it, though. Like
Sure.
those little mistakes because the backing tracks are always going to be perfect and they'll always be there to save me.
Yeah.
But going back to that song, like I've had a lot of people come up to me after I've played and tell me like, I went through that or I'm going through that, and it's nice to hear somebody talking about it because it's something that is like, oh well, you'll just get over that, like
No.
people don't really talk about it, especially men, so I think that has helped with the healing, is like being able to relate to other people about it
Yeah.
and to know that other people are able to relate to what I've written, because that's the ultimate thing, right? With art is you want other people to connect with it.
Yeah, because it's a relationship. People aren't just listeners. If they're really into what you're doing, they're not listeners anymore. You are in, whether you like it or not, a relationship with the listener. You've both tapped into something. You've created it, but the person is like an antenna. They're picking it up. They're processing it. It becomes a part of them. So it's as much theirs as it is yours. That's a beautiful reciprocity. That's a symbiotic relationship. It's indescribable to someone who isn't an artist to kind of get on board with that. But I really feel that way. I feel like if you've written something that's especially of some sort of emotional weight and another person it resonates with them, you have some kind of rapport and reciprocity with that person, and
Yeah,
that is a help to them.
yeah, and I think that's a big thing because like Nine Inch Nails, like that was a big
Mhm.
part of what all of those songs. Like I was like 16 when I found them, and I was going through like a bunch of shit, and that stuff really touched me and like helped me and gave me something to like, oh, I'm not the only person that feels this way.
Yeah.
And so that's what I've always wanted to do with music is, if you
Pay
can
it.
touch one person, then, but I also subscribe to that, once it might be mine when I'm recording it and everything and writing it, but
Yeah.
once you put it out, it doesn't belong to you anymore.
Nope. It's everyone
You know?
else's. It's
Yeah, it's in
everyone
the
else's.
ether. It's in the
Yep.
ether now. And so yeah, I definitely agree with that.
So you've been listening to my show. I'm pretty much going to guarantee you know what my next question is going to be because it's the only question that I ask everyone.
Yeah, but ask it for the sake of the listener.
For the sake of the listener,
For the sake of the listener, yeah.
what is it that terrifies you on an existential level?
So when I was a kid, I think what because I've been thinking about this, and I think when I was a kid, my biggest fear was like not making it or whatever, not living up to not being the person I wanted to be, getting stuck in some shitty career or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think as I got older, like how I define success has changed. So it's not like, I'm not living out the the self-destructor video playing arenas, so I'm a failure. Like that's not how I look at success anymore. So I think now my biggest fear is not being able to take care of my family.
Yeah.
And not being able to take care of myself.
I think that, as especially getting painted into the corner of the masculine archetype when we did, because we're both from the 70s and 80s, you know what I mean? Like that's when we were born. That still held true, right? Like to be held to the standard of the provider, the protector, the male archetype of Clint Eastwood or Charles Bronson of it all. Like you have to toe this line, you have to be this solid, upright man. Which I guess it's cool if that's who you want to be and that's the line you're towing. Good for you all. But in all actuality, a man is as sensitive and as fallible and as all feeling, all experiencing as any other gender you can possibly be.
Yeah.
It's really unfair to put that on ourselves, but I think men of a certain age were just stuck with that.
Oh yeah. I found this video of like Christmas when I was a kid, and my little brother's gay, right?
Yeah, mine
and
too.
There's this video of, and my little brother was like, obviously, like when we were kids, he
From
was
birth.
like into the Disney princesses and stuff, like
Yeah.
you knew.
Yep.
But I found this video and it was like Christmas, and they got him like a Jasmine doll or something from Aladdin, and my grandpa's like, the people gonna think he's a sissy with them dolls.
Yeah, dude.
And
yeah.
I was like, that's it. That's like the whole thing. Is like that's what you were faced with, that attitude,
Growing up when I did, my brother Gavin, he's not the youngest of my brothers, but my two youngest siblings are both my brothers. It's a whole bunch of girls. I come first, bunch of girls, then my little brothers. My brother Gavin, from the time he could walk, wanted to play with all of my sister's Barbies and walking, trying to put their shoes on, high heels specifically, and walking around in them and laughing. And I knew that. My dad, Vietnam veteran, tried to be a hippie, failed miserably because he was just who he was from the time period he was from, born in the 40s. Said some really fucked up shit and did not make that kid feel very secure. It was my job to step in on that and be the protector, so I did my best to deflect and keep him away from that negativity. But you're born that way, aren't you? Like you really are.
I think in most cases, like my little brother, like I knew it was always when we were kids, we were playing stuff. He wanted to be Catwoman, or he, it was always like the female character. It was always like this inherent like femininity to him, to where you just knew.
Yeah.
So I remember when he came out to me when he was in high school, it was like this big thing for him, and I was like, "Yeah, I know."
Did he get mad at you?
Known. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's like,
me
I
too.
don't care. Like,
Me
it's
too.
fine.
When my brother came out to me, I said, "I know, dude." He's like, "Don't say that." Okay, Gavin, but I knew, and I didn't give a fuck then, and I still don't now. You're still my brother. It doesn't matter. But I loved the fact that the time period, my brother didn't come out until he was in his 20s, and he'd already had a girlfriend that he lived with and did all that. So when he finally dropped the bomb, I felt a weight lifted off of me for him. even though there was no weight on me. It was just like, oh, thank God he could just be him now, and that part's over. The world now, you don't have to even bother. That, I think that's why I internalize so much of modern Gen Z society, why I'm so enamored of them, because had my brother been born at a different time period, there would have been no pressure. It would have been very little blowback for him. High school wouldn't have been my youngest brother getting into fist fights over protecting him because I was older. I couldn't be there. Obviously, I was away. You know, it's just it's a sick, sad thing that anyone had to suffer for who they wanted to be or who they felt, who they were inherently. That's not my experience in life because I was born cisgendered and straight.
Yeah.
I was just a weirdo.
Right.
It was easier for me.
And I think like the thing with the new generation is, you know, you still have these old conservative boomers saying the fucked up shit, but now it's these kids are like, you know, I don't give a fuck. You're not gonna bully me into not being who I am.
Yeah.
Like, fuck you. And that's just great. I love it.
Don't you think there's a component of being a Catholic that's also kind of negative concerning homosexual human beings? Even if they weren't explicitly saying this is a sin, that's a sin, you know, there's an air of it, and biblically speaking, there's a lot of the Bible that concerns itself with just that. And you know, the Bible's not divine. It was not written by God or anyone except people.
Right. It was written hundreds of years after those people that told those stories had died.
Yeah. There's no, like, we can't go fact check that, but it was written by fallible men, presupposing that, you know, the divine exists. Why would God, as we were to understand God from the Catholic perspective, need a bunch of dudes to write a rule book for him? It doesn't make sense, right?
None of it does. I remember when I was a kid, I got put into catechism, Sunday school stuff, right? And we got to like the point where you did communion, and I kept asking questions like, why are we drinking wine again for Jesus? Like, explain this to me.
Yeah.
And they couldn't. And then they got pissed because I kept asking questions, so they sent me to the office, and I just had to like, you know, write down like Bart Simpson, just writing Bible verses until my grandma came to pick me up. And then I was like, I'm not going to do this anymore. Like, and that was kind of when I knew this whole thing is bullshit.
Yeah.
Well, like, you can't just give me a straight answer. Even, you know, I get that I'm a child, but like, I'm sincerely asking, and, you know, there are no answers. It's just because I said so.
Yeah. And the thing that, like, my sticking point was always when it came to catechism, being an altar boy, confirmation, my beef with the whole faith and the whole book, everything. If God were truly all-knowing, all forgiving, all powerful, why did the book of Job even happen? Why did Satan have enough agency over anything that he could place a wager on the life of another human being with God, who's supposed to be omnipotent? Why did God entertain that and fuck this guy's entire life up? And the consolation price is, well, I gave him a better wife and better kids and a better farm. That's a fucking terrible lesson.
Well, I think a big thing with that is that most, like, Catholics and probably just Christians in general, like, they've never read that book.
Yeah,
they've never cracked that book open. Like, one time I was having this debate with my grandpa about religion, and he was like, look, go over there by my chair and get that Bible and open it up and look. And I went over, and it was a book that was called like Positive Bible Verses or something, and it was just like selected like not even the entire book.
Yeah.
It was just these little sections, and I was like, Grandpa, that is not the Bible. He's like, yes, it is. That is the Bible. And I was like, oh my God,
The
I can't
annotated book
even.
of awesome Jesus.
Yes, Buddy Christ, the book. But I was like, obviously, I can't have this discussion with you. Like, this is going nowhere.
My argument for Jesus has always been this. If Jesus were the person or God man that the book touted him to be, if Jesus were around now to experience the people who are preaching his word and devoting their lives to his teachings, he would smite them all.
Oh
They're
yeah,
the
well that's like
worst motherfuckers I've ever met in my life.
did you ever see that video of that Lauren Boebert bitch who was like
Yeah.
talking about how she was sick of separation of church and state, and she said this, if Jesus was alive now, he would want an AR-15.
Yeah, okay.
She
The Prince
said
of Peace
that.
would want a machine gun.
Yeah, she said that, and like sincerely, I think believes it. It's, I don't know. These people are so fucked up.
If you like take the supernatural out of it, take the the omnipotence out of the Bible, take the Old Testament out of the Bible, and just look at what the words of Christ were. It was, don't be a dick.
Yeah, pretty much.
Don't
And
be a
they're all failing
dick.
at that. They're all failing
Miserably.
at it miserably. Yeah.
He was a big hippie with a big heart who got fucked over by his best friend. It's like a John Hughes fucking film. And like, wow, man, just don't be a dick. And if you fail at that, how are you a Christian?
It's not hard to just be a good person, you know?
At all. At
It's
all.
really not.
Don't steal shit, don't lie, don't kill anybody, and try your best not to fuck around on your wife or fuck your friend's wife. You could do that standing on your head. I
Yeah.
think most atheists that I know have a better chance of getting into Christian heaven than Christians.
Or Satanists.
Or
Satanists are like so much more moral than most Christians are. It's ridiculous.
I have my card. I've been a member of the Church of Satan since 1994, since I was 18.
Very nice.
And Anton LaVey's whole bent, his whole tenet was, the innocent are the most satanic because they're pure, just they're free. I remember reading Satan Speaks by Anton LaVey, and it was just a bunch of essays he'd written toward the end of his life. He was really starting to see, what his life had amounted to. And he was talking about his youngest son, whose name escapes me, and watching his son just screw around, play on his dad's piano and chase the cats around the house. And he said there's nothing more satanic than a small child, because they don't hate, they don't concern themselves with vanity or greed or anything other than just having a good time, wanting to get a hug and a pat on the head and being close to the people they love and just having fun. If that's satanic, sign me up, bro.
Yeah.
Sign me
For
up.
real.
There's no evil in the Church of Satan. My wife is very Christian. I've told her this a million times. Like, Anton LaVey Satanism, there's no Satan. Satan doesn't exist.
Satan doesn't exist. Yeah.
It's a fallacy.
It's all about iconography.
Yeah.
Which that's a big thing with Catholicism that I do enjoy, is the iconography and
I'm covered.
statues and stuff.
I'm covered in Catholic tattoos because I think they're beautiful.
They really are, yeah.
Like, the visage of Christ itself is gorgeous. Like, Guadalupe, I have tattooed on me. I'm not even Mexican. It's just that they're gorgeous icons, and they stand for something beautiful at their heart. But in all reality, it's the same thing as believing that being a Democrat or a Republican is going to change the way the world works, or it's going to signal to others what you are. I'm neither, and I never will be.
Yeah.
I fuck Democrats, fuck Republicans. They're part of a machine. They're just trying to get your money.
Oh,
It
yeah.
has nothing to do with the way the world really works, because money rules the world.
Oh, yeah.
Money.
They're just looking out for their rich buddies.
Yep.
That's the whole thing. And I always get like tripped up whenever these like crazy Trump people will be like, if you didn't vote for Trump, you must be a huge Biden fan. And they'll be like, well, what about Biden? Do you think Biden should get investigated? Yes.
The whataboutisms. Yes, Biden should be investigated
They
because
should
he's
all be
dirty.
investigated. Yeah, fuck all of them.
What about Obama? Obama was dirty too. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I voted for the man not once but twice. But you know what? I've said it before on the show, but what kills me, what killed my opinion of Barack Obama, who I had been enamored of, I loved him. When the water crisis was going on in Flint, Michigan, he went to speak to the people who were largely African American, about to give the speech, and he's like, can I have a glass of water? No, not the bottled water. Just give me tap water. That's all. I just need tap water. No, this isn't a stunt. I just want the tap water. It's like, it's not a Barack. It's a stunt. You're not drinking that fucking water. You're not drinking that water because you know it's killing these people, but you're trying to send a message that it's not. That is disingenuous. That is corporate, and that is sick. And I knew he was a sellout from there on in. It's not like I'm picking on Obama. I think the Clintons are some of the most evil people that ever lived, and I voted for Bill Clinton. First time I ever voted was for Bill Clinton. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I got to the point where I started to see it all for what it really was, and it's just a masquerade. It's a game. I could vote for Bernie Sanders until I'm blue in the face. The man's never going to ascend to the seat of president because they don't want him.
Right.
He's too dangerous.
Yeah. It's like I voted for the first time ever in the last election, and like I wasn't voting for Joe Biden. I was voting to
Against
get Trump out. You know what I mean?
We were all voting against Trump. I voted for Biden because I was voting against Trump, not because I like Joe Biden. And
exactly.
He's from my hometown. He's from Scranton. He's a terrible person.
Oh yeah.
Not as terrible as Trump.
No, but terrible. Like,
but terrible.
Yeah.
For certain. We're never going to get a president that's going to care about us. It's not going to happen. The best we can do is find someone at the local level that isn't as terrible as the rest of the people at the local level and get them in office and try to affect change in a microcosm. Because as much as I grew up being raised by hippies, having that mentality that one voice can change the world, it can't. But what one voice can do is get to another set of ears who could become another voice, who could get to another set of ears, who could become another voice, and then we can become a movement.
Well, that's why they want to shut TikTok down, you know?
Yep.
Because we're all hearing each other's voices, and they don't like that.
So what are your immediate plans musically next? What's your next goal? Your next immediate, like within the next 2 months goal?
Just try to play more shows. I've got like 6 shows lined up over the next, like, between now and May. And I want to get more shows out of state because I played in like Hattiesburg and Jackson, which are like 2 or 3 hours away. But I want to play in like Louisiana and Alabama and Florida. And I've been talking to people over there. So hopefully that'll work out because, you know, I just want to play in front of as many people as I can. And I feel like people over there would dig what I'm doing, especially in New Orleans.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And if you ever had a hankering to come up north, I can certainly get you something in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York.
Nice.
Without question. And I could get you a place to crash in Pennsylvania.
Very nice. Thank you.
Absolutely. Uh, so I guess to kind of wrap it up, um, what would you like people to walk away from this episode with in accordance with or concerning, your music, your album, what you're putting out into the world?
Just that it's sincere, which I think is the most important aspect of it, is that it's, I'm singing about stuff that I mean, and I'm singing about stuff that I think is important to me, and I'm not just trying to like write a bunch of shit to sound cool,
Hmm.
which I think most of that kind of music is just like, what can I do to sound cool, which is fine,
Yeah.
but that's just not what I want.
No, because like if we think about the bands that make music kind of in line with this, there's 5 or 6 that are really, really excellent at it. And they're the honest ones. And everything else is kind of noise in the background.
Yeah,
That's the thing that had struck me most about this record, about what you do, is it's not contrived at all. It doesn't ascribe to, you know, Dracula music, as Toby calls it. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't try to be that brooding artist in the corner, like, with the black
yeah,
lipstick on, trying to be all mysterious. It's just an expression of self, and that's the most important thing you can do, is just express yourself.
yeah. That's all I'm trying to do, and I never know how well it comes across, but it seems like it's coming across pretty well, I guess.
It is for certain. You didn't miss with me anyway. All right, brother. So listen, it's 10 something at night. I bent your ear quite a bit tonight. When the next record's getting ready, or single or whatever is getting ready to come down the pike, ready to go, would you hit me up and come back on here and we could talk more about it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome, my friend.
Yeah, I'd like that.
I had a great time with you tonight. I can't wait to
Yeah,
do it
so did
again.
I. Yeah, so did I.
All right,
Thanks for
buddy.
so much for having me on.
Thank you for coming on. I appreciate you.
All right, man. Have a good night.
You too. I had a great time talking to Tony. Excellent human being. Love him to death. Love Funeral Date. Please, by all means, go out, download the record, buy it on iTunes, listen to it wherever you stream music. It's well worth your time. Also, go backward a little bit. Check out the album Coast Goth. Absolutely incredible stuff. Fully immersive, beautiful, encapsulates the sound and spirit that he'd set out to accomplish, with the danceable misery aspect, the happy sad of it all. He's been Tony of Funeral Date. I've been Peter of this podcast. You've been beautiful. And this has been the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. Have a great night, everybody, from 3:33 a.m. studios. Take care.